Meanwhile, the Paris Peace Forum taking place this week will launch a call to action regarding the melting ice caps and also delve into the regulation of artificial intelligence. Humanitarian crisis in the Gaza Strip is the latest addition to the gathering's agenda. So on that note, let's bring the latest from SABC News correspondent Alex Cadier. Alex, good afternoon. At this hour, perhaps you could give us, your stance as to really the goal of this conference as it begins shortly.
Well, I'll tell you what, it's an incredibly ambitious agenda. They will be talking about the polar ice caps. They will be talking about space. They will be talking about the benefits and risks of AI. They will have the Christchurch call that is chaired by former New Zealand Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern, and that's looking to try to eliminate terrorist content online. And as you mentioned yesterday, they were talking about the crisis in the Middle East. So it's certainly a very ambitious forum, a very ambitious conference with a lot on the agenda, a lot of thought leaders from around the world gathered in Paris to address these big issues. The focus primarily will be on climate change, will be on the polar ice caps, will be on trying to hash out and start setting international standards for how countries can behave and should behave, both towards the ice caps and also as far up as in space as well. So as I said, a very broad topic and just trying to find cohesion. Now we know there's a big African representation at this forum. Of course we know that Africa is disproportionately affected by climate change, so it's an opportunity for these leaders to meet with their European counterparts and with high polluting countries. We know that Nana Akufo-Addo, the president of Ghana, is here. Macky Sall, the Senegalese president, also here. The president of the International Crisis Group, Comfort Aero, making herself present, as well as African industry groups and members of parliament from across the continent. So certainly that strong African representation, having those tough conversations with their high polluting partners from Europe and further around the world.
Well, Alex, speaking about having those tough conversations, is it also fair to say that the meeting now has been overshadowed by events that are transpiring in the Middle East? How's that also been factored in?
Yeah, that is fair. Certainly, it took the headlines yesterday. President Macron opening the pre-peace Paris conference on peace in Gaza. So it was tacked on about a week ago, just before the Paris Peace Forum, that this conference would happen. President Macron calling for a ceasefire. He's calling for working towards a ceasefire, using that word for the first time. And Élysée Palace officials behind the scenes telling us that the reason for the changes language is that escalating humanitarian crisis in Gaza. And that was the big focus. It is still the big focus, as we've been reporting here on SABC News, of the news agenda at the moment. But we've heard a shift in European position, calling for those humanitarian pauses. We've seen the Belgian Prime Minister saying that Israel's response has become disproportionate, and it is really ramping up that pressure on Israel to allow for the humanitarian pauses, which they now have done. But certainly that aspect of political pressure, but also practical solutions to the humanitarian crisis. The president of Cyprus offering a maritime corridor for aid to be able to get into Gaza. We know that the land borders are incredibly difficult to get through. Those aid trucks are only trickling through. Well, Cyprus says we can land ships in the southwestern part of the Gaza Strip that are full of aid to be able to deliver us food, water, fuel, medical supplies for those who so desperately need it. So diplomatic pressure on one hand, but also practical solutions to that crisis in Gaza.